Welcome to Kevin Richards VIPs. My guest has been through her share of struggles and survival. She's doing the best that she can. Let's get to know Lindsay Forrest. So I'm sitting in Tan and Tone with my amazing guest, Lindsay Forrest. We've got some really big things to talk about today, and I'm looking forward to talking to you, Lindsay. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
So, Lindsay, we got a lot to unpack here, but what I want to do first is just get to know you a little bit, what it was like growing up for you before we get into all the other stuff. What was it like for you growing up?
Yeah. So I grew up in Collingwood, and I have a twin sister, and I was very fortunate. I went to a good high school, had a wonderful family life, a lot of friends. I was very active, involved in the community, and very involved in my high school, so prom and sports teams and everything like that. And what seemed on the outside was a very normal and happy adolescent teenage years growing up. And then I transitioned into university and went to the University of Guelph, where I then moved back to Toronto after university and kind of began my career there. And now I'm back in Barrie working at Tan and Tone, and I absolutely love it.
Interesting. What's it like growing up with a twin? I would love to do a whole show on twins and triplets, just because there's so much, it's just so amazing to know that there's somebody who just, they look like you, or they've got similar things. And what's that like for you?
It's very different, and I'm very fortunate to have a twin sister. It's such a unique bond that you have with someone. We're only 2 minutes apart. We're fraternal, and we are
Who's
like
older?
any. I'm older, of course, the more mature one and wise.
Yeah, by 2 minutes.
And so like any siblings, we get along really great, and sometimes we have our moments where we don't get along as well. But
Sure.
we love each other very much, and we support each other in a lot that we do, and it's just a very, like I said, it's a very special bond that we have. So I'm really lucky to have someone like her, kind of by my side throughout my life. So,
Nice.
Yeah.
So what did you take at university?
I took criminal justice.
Wow.
Yeah, and so that was kind of my passion at the time. Just coming into high school, I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. And there was a lot of pressure to go to university. Kind of at that time, it was, I wasn't quite sure, and that seemed interesting, especially with all the crime shows and at that time. So I transitioned into that fairly easy. So yeah, it's great.
It is a fascinating field, and there's a lot of, look on Netflix and other channels, and even Rogers, there's always something going on with, involving crime. So it's fascinating. That's interesting.
Yeah.
So from there, you somehow wind up in this world of beauty and possibly wanting to compete. Where did you start to look at your health before we get into the competition aspect?
Yeah.
Where did you realize that you've had a passion for health?
So I realized at a young age, I was always very competitive and very active. So I took my health very seriously, and I took my sports very seriously. And I always knew that I wanted to kind of, if you felt good, you would look good, and it would transition into other areas and aspects of your life. And so I was always, like I said, my competitive nature, it just really motivated me and kind of kept me out of trouble in high school and that. And that's how I met a lot of my friends, and it really gave me a sense of purpose throughout my high school years, and just, even in university, I did a lot of intramural sports, and it was just a really healthy way to meet people and kind of build those bonds and friendships over the year.
Sure, and the fact that you were able to sort of embrace this, or at least be intrigued by it in high school, it's very different than some of the other generations before you, my generation, other generations, where high school, we didn't have social media. We didn't have that sort of stuff, and you had the occasional buff kid who, why is he so buff, or the occasional girl who was, in good shape and she was in track. But things are very different now. So you had a whole different social media aspect too. Did you find that there was an impact of social media on you as a teenager and growing through that?
Well, it's interesting. So I think in my, when I was a teenager, that's when social media really started to become very popular, and it almost became the norm. So that's when I started to notice I was focusing more on the aesthetics of fitness and health and wellness versus the actual fitness part of it and the health benefits and why do I work out and why do I go to the gym.
Yeah.
And that's where, when Facebook came out and social media and Instagram, that's when I really started to see fitness in a whole different way. And I think that's when it actually started to turn a little bit negative for me. And I started to become obsessed with this ideal figure, this ideal body.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of young women my age were so impressionable. And, we want to look a certain way and we see, men are attracted to that and guys are attracted to that. So that's the definition of beauty. So then it became almost toxic in a way because I felt I had this obligation because I was always very fit and very healthy to maintain that. So that's when it started to become kind of an unhealthy, aspect of my life when it's depicted as, this healthy lifestyle.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate that people are looking at it on a physical basis.
Yeah.
And not the, wow, she has a great personality, and wow, she's very intellectual, and wow, we have things, mentally, emotionally in common.
Yeah.
And they look at a look or an image, and you take a look at Marilyn Monroe, size 14, people were in love with her.
Yeah.
But nowadays it's about being not even a size. It's a 2, it's a 4 or less.
Yeah.
So did you find that there was maybe a bullying aspect of it, or there was anything like that ever made you push into that world as well?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean,
and where did those bullies come from?
So in high school and even in elementary school, I was bullied my whole life. And it was always because, anytime you strive or anytime you, look a certain way or you act a certain way or you're in, the unquote popular crowd, there's always that risk of being bullied. And for me, I never aligned with the way that I presented myself. And I always felt that I wasn't being genuinely who I wanted to be. I always would hang out with people who, looks were very important and, your social status and everything like that. And I cared to that to an extent because it was better to be in with them and bullied rather than be out of the crowd and be bullied on the outside. So that's why, I never really aligned with who I was in high school, and that really affected me emotionally and mentally because, girls can be mean, women can be mean. We all, we all can, and we're all, we can be judgmental and we can be cruel, and there's a lot of competition and pressure as a woman to be and look a certain way. Yeah. And I think that that's where, anytime I would try and be myself, be that kind person, people might see it as fake because they don't know me, they don't know, I am coming from a place of sincerity and I do care about what you're saying. Yeah. But because there's that perception of, oh, this person's, standoffish or whatever, it's like they don't get to know the real me. Yeah. So,
and that really sucks, to be honest. It really just sucks. Yeah. Because there's a painful place.
There is.
And that pain is sometimes from within the bully.
Absolutely.
Because those insults and those accusations or the meanness that can come out, it doesn't say anything about you. It says something about the bully.
Absolutely.
Right? And so what I've also noticed is it's not just women who go through this. There are men who go through this too. There's fat 100%. Shaming, and there's the tall, skinny kid, or the other kid with the big nose, or the freckles, or the acne, and all these different things. There's always things that people seem that they had to pick apart. Yeah. Right? And so it also seems to be getting younger. Have you noticed that now it's, when we were kids, I don't remember, I keep going back to how back, walking uphill both ways, 5 miles. There's this whole thing though where people are putting little kids on diets. Yeah. People are watching what their little kids are eating. I know little kids who've never had a Happy Meal. Little kids who've never really had French fries. They've never tried ketchup. They've never just had little fun things. Yeah. Because they're made to be a certain way.
Exactly.
And sometimes it's the parents, which is scary. Yeah. Or it's friends at school, or it's just whatever. Have you noticed that whole image thing is getting younger and younger?
I can't tell you how frightening it is to see just how young it starts, as young as 5. I mean, I see young girls, I can't even tell someone's age anymore because of the way that they look, and just, you know, the things that they're getting involved in, their dietary needs. And, you know, I've worked in the service industry pretty much all my life as well.
Yeah.
And I see parents, you know, ordering their children as young as 5. They need a gluten-free bun and they need non-GMO this. And I understand that we're trying to promote a healthy lifestyle, and
Sure.
I completely support that. But if something isn't an allergy or it's not poisonous to you, or, you know, I think we want to promote healthy eating and being healthy within.
Yeah.
And I think the younger generation right now is so fixated on, you know, the way that you need to look and the way that you need to be eating. There's so much societal pressure that if you eat gluten, you know, people are like, well, you know, why are you eating that? There's a lot of judgments, and it's concerning because it's really promoting disordered eating, and it's really promoting a lot of restriction. And yeah, I mean, I had an incident where I had a 5-year-old who, it was his 6th birthday coming up, and we were talking about, you know, what are you doing for your party? And he says, well, I'm not having a birthday cake. And I said, what do you mean you're not having a birthday cake? It's your birthday. And he said, no, I want a watermelon cake. There's too many calories in the birthday cake.
Wow.
And that really struck home for me. And I know that it was a very health conscious family.
Yeah.
And I know that the parents had a very large influence on that. But I think that really takes away from his childhood, because who doesn't want a birthday cake at that age? I mean, it's to be celebrated. It's to be enjoyed. It's about moderation.
Yeah.
But I think now it's to the extreme where there's so much misinformation out there, and you're bombarded with all of these different, you know, diets and trends, and it's like, you know, we need to get back to the basics. We need to get back to what's really important. Life, and, you know, enjoying your food and enjoying your meal, being in tune with your body mentally, emotionally, and, you know, really promoting a wellness factor within. And I think once you do that, and working on the mental health and working on, you know, the wellness of the child starting from a young age, because they're so impressionable.
Absolutely.
And I think, you know, given our, you know, they have access to the internet, they have access to this. They're watching their parents.
Yeah. You know, I saw a study, and it was a really cool study, and they had done these two different study groups, and they had shown them a piece of cake. And one was to North American study, and one was to a European study. And all over North America, people looked at this piece of cake and said, oh, disgust, guilt, and all these horrible things. And every single person in Europe said, celebration, party, fun, chocolate, you know, and they looked at it as a good thing. And I think our North American, Western world group is just taking a look at things and guilting ourselves into so many things. And we kind of bully ourselves.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So let me kind of unpack what we were talking about earlier. So now you've gone from being very health oriented and looking at these things. When does it start to become you want to compete? When did you realize you wanted to do that?
So for me, when I knew I wanted to compete, again, it was because of my competitive nature and my love for fitness. And I love the idea of having that regimented schedule, and I love that idea of challenging myself personally, because I had always been a very team-oriented person. And so this was kind of a goal for myself that I wanted to do, and so I took it on, and I tend to do things to the extreme. So this was perfect because it's a sport that you take it to the extreme. You take your nutrition, your working out, everything is, you are 110% committed to that. You don't have a life outside of it. And that is why, you know, again, it's a sport. It's like an Olympic sport or anything like that. You have to be committed 100% to be that elite athlete.
There's a drive.
There's a drive. And I certainly appreciate that aspect of it. But it's like anything, there can be negatives to it. And if you're not mentally and emotionally stable to handle that type of pressure.
Yeah.
You are walking on a stage where you are being critiqued by your body.
Yeah.
And that is probably the most terrifying thing you can think of doing as a woman. I mean, we critique ourselves daily, you know, on the littlest things, and you're walking on a stage, you're in a bikini, and you're being critiqued on your body. And never
unfairly
really,
a lot of it too, because there are people who are judges who are also trainers.
Yeah.
And some of those people have trained people on the stage, and they're also judging the people they've trained against other people. There's a lot of nasty politics.
Absolutely.
And the fact that you are standing on stage, there's a term called bikini back pose that always makes me laugh, because there's a hair flip and a stick your butt in the camera or stick your butt towards the judges.
Yeah.
And if anybody's never been to these shows, they need to Google this if you get a chance, or watch this, because the shows are a little intense.
They are.
And I've been to these shows, and what's crazy is I'm walking through these shows, I'm fully dressed. There are people walking through the lobby, men in bikini briefs, or the guys that do mankini, which wear the boxer short or the longer shorts, the board shorts. But there's women in little teeny, sparkly, jazzed up bikinis, all spray tanned, all jazzed up. Most of them are so depleted, because they've had no water for 3 days and whatever else. You know how that's going to affect you hormonally. And they're walking through these places. It is a very, very different, strange, sometimes grotesque, sometimes amazing world, because there is a certain athleticism, and then there's a certain wow, like I can't believe I'm watching this kind of wow factor. So you must see that when you're there.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when you're at this show and you're about to take the stage and you know that you're about to be judged, what is that like for you?
It is utterly terrifying, because especially when you have kind of a perfectionistic mentality like myself, when you go out on that stage, all you can think about is, you know, it's exciting, it's nerve-wracking, and you've put months and years of effort into going on stage for that, you know, those 5 minutes. And I myself had a shift when I was on stage, because once you see your body a certain way, and once you see what you're capable of, it's very hard to go back to, you know, gaining the weight and going back to kind of a normal mindset.
Post-show depression.
Exactly. And so because you work so hard, and because, you know, you're training every day, and you give up so much, you give up time with friends, family, meals, you know, you're training 3-4 hours a day, and it is taxing on your personal life, your relationships, everything. And to be up there for those, you know, 5-10 minutes, as excited as you are, and as much anticipation that you have, you know, oh my God, this is amazing, and all of these mixed emotions, then it's over. Yeah. And then you're left with
kind of floating away.
You're and you're exhausted. You know, I don't even remember the day of my show, because I was so depleted and so dehydrated, and you're just on kind of fight or flight of emotion. Yeah. And
so many people do the shows more than once, and they compete, and then part of that competition and that drive, not just women but men too. Yeah. They'll start into other worlds of steroids and whatever else, and there's men dying in their 50s because they're jacked up, they're 300 pounds, because they're also obsessed. Yeah. And it's almost an illness. It really is. It is. And so we're going to get into this now, because this is really important. This is the message I really want shared with our viewers today, and anybody who's watching is, so there's a point now where you've battled to get on stage, to compete. You're battling to go, you know, to stay away from the dark side of everything that comes after the show. At what point do you realize that now you're maybe making changes in your life, health-wise, that aren't necessarily the best, but you're doing them? What put you there? Yeah.
So for me, it definitely started before my show, that I used as an excuse to have that regimen with my food and with my training. And a lot of women and men do that, because, you know, it is a way to kind of hide the disordered eating. And for me, there was a shift when I just became obsessed with it, when nothing else mattered. My relationships didn't matter, my job didn't matter, nothing else mattered. What mattered was, you know, eating this amount of calories and making sure that I worked out this time of day and getting in, you know, my fasted cardio, and it became an obsession, and it became all consuming, and it's all I could think about, because at the end of the day, you know, I would be exhausted, I would be malnourished, I would be dehydrated, because I was trying to maintain this weight that was so unhealthy, that was depicted as healthy, and, you know, I was praised for it. And I posted a picture of my show, and everyone thought, oh my God, you look amazing.
Yeah.
And, you know, you kind of get on this high, because when people see you that way, then you feel obligated to maintain that.
Yeah.
And it's so unrealistic. And mentally, it's so taxing on you. And I think that, like I said, when it affects every aspect of your life, when it becomes this obsession, and, you know, I would spend hours on Instagram just, you know, looking up fitness models and looking up different ways of doing things, and it just consumed my life.
Yeah, and this story is not unique.
Yeah.
Every story is different, but it's not unique, the basis of it, right? So, how do I put this? There are people who look at you, want to be like you. You want to maintain a certain standard as well too, because these people are all complimenting you. You kind of almost feel the pressure that you need to look a certain way.
Yeah.
But at what point do you realize now that you have bulimia, that you have this problem? Like, we're gonna get into some heavy stuff here. I wanna know, like, are you throwing up? Are you weighing things? Because I've got experience with people in the past in my life, unfortunately, that there are people who will weigh what they, you know, excrete, will weigh what they throw up. They will throw up after everything. They'll binge eat. They'll have 4 salads, but they'll go throw them up. Yeah. So let's kind of look at that a little bit. What were you doing to try and maintain or keep the weight down?
Yeah. So because my eating disorder started at such a young age, I struggled with being very overweight. So I, at one point, was over 200 pounds. And then
I can't imagine that.
I lost all of the weight due to restriction. And all I did was go on the internet, and I Googled how to lose weight. And I actually familiarized myself with laxatives, which that's something that is not really talked about. And there's a huge part of the industry that abuses laxatives. And so, again, it's not anything glorified and I know it's probably, you know, not something anyone wants to talk about. It's an embarrassing subject, but I think that that's something that... It's
the not pretty side of it, but it's the reality, and it's the facts, and it's some of the heart-wrenching truth. So so I started, you know, taking one a night, and over the years, I started to know how to manipulate my body, because I would either restrict, or I would purge, or I would binge. Yeah. And there were all these different methods, and there were all these different ways that I would cope emotionally with food. Yeah. And it was a way I could control what was going on around me in my life, and it was a way that I could kind of cope with the emotional stress that I was dealing with, as anyone does. We all have our different coping methods. Yeah. But food was always my comfort, and food was always my way of managing my life. Yeah. And so, you know, with the laxatives and the fat burners and the caffeine pills and the ephedrine and, you know, all of these over-the-counter available supplements, I was abusing them. I was taking them way past the recommended dose. I was exercising, you know, 3-4 times a day. I was, you know, any calorie that I would put into my body, it would be such a mental battle, even just having to tell myself, it's okay to eat. It's okay to have food. And I would beat myself up over it. It's like, I'm sure some people can't even say what they had for breakfast this morning. Yeah. Yet I could tell you everything that was in my breakfast, every calorie, every nutrient, and you get so fixated on it. You get so fixated on the number, and it becomes obsession. And I developed OCD over it. So I had to take, you know, this many pills to get through a day, and I had to work at this many hours, and
expend this many calories, and it just becomes this. It's like a disease. It is. Yeah. It's a disease. And it takes over your life in the most debilitating way.
The Canadian Mental Health Association does look at it actually as a mental illness.
Absolutely.
So at what point do you say, that's it, I've got bulimia, or I've got anorexia, or I've got, what was the word that came to you that made you realize that?
So for me, and I mean, it's a little bit difficult to talk about, but I think that the reality is of any eating disorder, it's not necessarily about the image. A lot of it has to do with the control, and you're more vulnerable when you're overweight, and a lot of women and men who have eating disorders have had trauma in the past. I myself have had trauma in the past, and food has always been my coping, as I mentioned before.
Yeah.
My diagnosis was when I had 3 months post-show after my competition.
Yeah.
I had gotten to a place where I knew I couldn't live the way I was living because I was slowly killing myself because of all the supplements I was using and just the way I was functioning. I would not even call it living. I was just barely functioning at a minimal level. And I couldn't find a way to bring myself out of that hole because putting on weight was terrifying to me, because it meant I would be vulnerable. It meant I would be normal. It meant I wouldn't have the control that I did. And changing any sort of regimen in my day was terrifying to me.
Sure.
But I knew that what I was doing was killing me. So I actually got into such a deep depression, which is associated with eating disorders, depression, anxiety, and debilitating anxiety, because you become so introverted and stuck in your own world that that's all you see, and it's all consuming.
Well, it affects your kidneys, your liver, your
organ,
heart, your mind, and your soul.
Yeah.
It's everything.
Yeah.
It's all enveloping. So what I want to ask you is, so you're in this place, all right? And the odd thing is that people always think it's women, right?
Yeah.
There are men who they weigh themselves before bed, and they weigh themselves in the morning, and there are men who have the same weight issues, and there are men who will do very similar things.
Yeah.
Again, it is unfortunately, men can be a little rough on women and their image.
Yeah.
What did you do? Where did you get your help, and what did you do to turn it around? And were there some things that you realized that were sort of just a idea or misrepresentation of what was going through you?
Well, I knew I needed help when I was finally hospitalized, and I ended up in the hospital, and I'm very fortunate to be here today because of my family and my family support. And I ended up going into a treatment center in Guelph at Homewood Health Center, which has an eating disorder program with only 21 available beds. And I was on a wait list for a month and a half until I was accepted, and it's a private care facility, so it's very costly. And at the time, it was what saved my life, because the thought of eating, if I can describe it to you, it was like if you're terrified of heights, the thought of someone putting a plate of food in front of me and saying, eat it, it's like if you're afraid of heights, they're asking you to go do the skywalk on the CN Tower every day. It was, and I felt so alienated, and I felt crazy because I thought, why can't I just eat this food? And there was just so much emotion and turmoil surrounding eating food. And so when I went into treatment, I was there for 4 months, and they were wonderful.
And now you're with us. And now you're with us back on the mend.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it's only a 30-minute show. Yeah. There's so much more I want to ask you, but unfortunately, we have to wrap things up. Okay. But I want to tell you that I'm inspired, and I think that what you've battled through is amazing. And thank you for doing today's show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Lindsay.
Thank you.
Thanks.